61. It took about a year and a half, but it's kind of the way of the future. Take a long-range look at your improvements. Everybody knows these projects are very expensive, so you've got to figure out a financial plan to make them a reality. There's a lot of grant opportunities out there, so we want to find the best projects and the best time to do them. I know there's already a lot of discussion on when are we going to do Highway 5, when are we going to do 82nd, when are we going to do Rolling Acres. So what this plan will do is scientifically look at all the needs and then come up with an implementation plan. There might be a dozen projects, there might be 5, we don't know. Who's responsible for what in terms of cost, what grant opportunities there are, and how we would move forward. So that's kind of the end game, and we'd like to get the support from all 3 cities and the state. Of course, MnDOT's a big partner in this, so we kind of have a consensus-built plan at the end of it. And then we can go do our work, try to get the money, and implement the projects. So with that, we've already, we're in it 8 months already. We're about a third of the way through, just over a third of the way through, and we hope to be done by the end of November next year. Seems like a long time, but there's lots of phases in between. So what I'd like to do is have Angie Bursaw, who is from our consultant Bolton & Menk, and she is the project manager, with Angie Stenson, who's our senior transportation planner. They're kind of leading the effort to give an update on where we're at.
Perfect. Linda, did you give your title just for the record?
Sorry. I'm Lyndon Robgent, the Director of Public Works for Carver County.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
Thanks for having me tonight. I'm Angie Bursaw with Bolton & Menk. As Lyndon mentioned, I'm a co-project manager on this study. I have a few slides for us tonight, but I do hope this is informal. So if you have questions, please stop me along the way. We want to give you an update on what we've been working on the past 8 months or so, and some of the public engagement we've done and what we've heard, and then where we're heading next. We've kind of split this this corridor or this project area into, there's many corridors involved, and because of there's so many, we're having to kind of take this in 2 phases in terms of what we're diving into first and what we're diving into next, even as an analysis piece. The map in front of you shows all of the various corridors. Highway 5, all the way from Victoria's western limits, all the way to the east to Highway 41. Rolling Acres Road, that is the red segment there between Highway 7 and Highway 5. Highway 41, which is in the purple, that's sort of a secondary. I would say Highway 41 and Bavaria Road are sort of secondary. They're important to how this network works together, but our primary focuses are on 5, Rolling Acres Road, and then 82nd Street, which is in the green. But of course, it's a network study. So we're looking at, okay, we know certain roads are going to need improvements, but how do they all work together, and what does that mean to other corridors as well? So I'm going to dive in here. One of our first stages of a study like this is to look at what we call purpose and need. So really, what are the needs out there from a very technical standpoint of a traffic analysis, diving into the engineering details of what's going on out there today, but then also the engagement pieces from people who live there, people who drive it daily, corridor users, whether they're in a car or they're walking or they're biking, what is their experience? Because it's not always just about the traffic numbers. So we've been putting together what we call our purpose and need. And then our next step is we really take a dive into, okay, based on those needs, what are some improvements that can help address the needs? And this is where I've mentioned we kind of split this into 2 phases. So we're first looking at Highway 5, we call east. So basically from Rolling Acres Road all the way to 41. So we haven't dove into the details of downtown Victoria yet. That will be at a future meeting at a future date. As Lyndon mentioned, we're going all the way through, next fall basically. So right now when we're talking about Highway 5 tonight, just keep in mind it's Rolling Acres to Highway 41. And then we're also looking at 82nd Street for this first phase of just understanding needs, not talking about priorities yet. One of our initial work here is also looking at goals. So what are we trying to do? Obviously, we want to fix the needs that are out there, but what does it mean to fix? What are we trying to fix? What do we want to try to achieve? And this is just a very high-level overview of that. We want to make sure that for mobility for vehicles, so people can get through with congestion-free environment can get through efficiently. We want to make sure it's safe. We want to make sure that's safe for all travelers, not just vehicles or people on the highways, but also for those walking and biking, getting across, getting along. We have regional trails in this area, you know, how all those things come together. We also know that we have a very, great resources in this area as far as environmental sensitive areas. We have lakes, we have wetlands, there's park preserves, the Arboretum area, lots of destinations and things that are important, we know, to your community, to the other communities involved. We want to make sure that what we do doesn't impact those negatively, or we're looking at how that works together. And then finally, financial responsibility. We want to make sure that we don't come up with this great big grand plan that nothing can ever be done about it, because financial resources are limited. So how can we make improvements but also respect what's available out there? So now I'm going to take a little bit of a dive into some of the needs. And I don't intend to go through these in very much detail, because I think you probably understand a lot of these needs already. But the first slide here is really talking about from a traffic perspective, from a moving vehicles on our roadways perspective. Today, what this is showing, if you can see the red and the purple lines on the corridors, particularly Highway 5, up at Rolling Acres and 7, those are backups. Those are backups that are beyond what we would anticipate for intersections operating efficiently. We know that there are several intersections in particular along Highway 5 that are a problem. They're bottlenecks. Highway 5 and Rolling Acres Road, it's just not working today. So we look at what's today, and then we also look at how's that going to change in the future. So this just establishes that we do have intersection and corridor problems, where it's not just the intersections, but it's backing up and impacting movements on the corridors. And then we look out 20 years. So not that this is a completely realistic framework, but this is saying, okay, if we didn't do anything, we didn't improve anything in the next 20 years, but we recognize the growth that is projected in Victoria. You can see those stats, 54%, lots of growth happening here, but also Chanhassen, Chaska, and then Carver County. There's areas west of here. There's areas north and west of here that are also growing that use these corridors. If we didn't do anything, how would that change the view? And you can see lots more red. I don't need to go into all those details. It just, the problems get worse. We also take a look at safety and try to just get a baseline for how it's working today. We look at a 3-year period of crashes. This is, I believe it's 2015 to 17. Looking at, do we have crashes that are, all roadways typically have some crashes, but are those that are above and beyond what we would expect for these type of corridors, these type of intersections? The square boxes that are red and they sort of have an orange hue around those are intersections that we're paying a lot of attention to. They are above what we call a critical crash rate. That just basically means that has some statistical significance, that there is a problem there. So we have that at Rolling Acres Road and Highway 7, Rolling Acres and Highway 5, Highway 5 and 41, and then you can see the couple that are down there along 82nd Street as well. We also have, because of the congestion, there's some red along Highway 5 and 82nd Street. That means we're seeing crashes on the corridors as well, not just at the intersections, but at those corridors, most likely due to some of the backups and, things that you don't necessarily anticipate as you're driving along a corridor like that. So we know that there are safety issues we want to address. The next slide here is the end of our needs slide, and I just really wanted to bring back again the different modes. This is a lot of information to take in, but we have some regional trails that cross through the area. There's one that crosses Rolling Acres Road. There also are some planned facilities from the Met Council in terms of, we think about trails is it a transportation purpose or is it a recreational purpose? Both. We have both of that in these corridors. Some people choose to ride their bikes or walk to work, and others use these for recreation. So we need to be paying attention to where do we have gaps, where are they trying to cross, and make sure that our improvements address those and make sure that they can do that safely. I'm going really fast, so if you stop me if you have any questions, but I want to make sure we get through this too. Just a word on process. This is my first time in front of the council, your first update. We do have several of these planned with you and also with other councils to make sure they're keeping up with the study. And I want to point you to the graphic, if you can look at that on your screen. What this is showing is we do have a lot of different agencies involved and public groups involved and kind of how this decision-making flow works. So the project management team, that's really Carver County and MnDOT. They're administering our contract, just making sure we're doing things as we're under contract to do. The Technical Advisory Committee is more of a staff group of the planners and engineers from the three cities and the county and MnDOT, meeting every month, looking at technical data, hearing what the public is saying, and kind of keeping this thing rolling. All of that then feeds down to the councils. So you here, Chaska Council, Chanhassen Council, Carver County Board, and MnDOT to make decisions. So even though we have a lot of different engagement groups and groups that are out there, those are all very important, but they all there's this circular feedback loop of getting the engagement, bringing it in, folding that into our designs, and then bringing it to councils and county boards for decisions, so that at the end, as Lyndon said, our goal is that we have all of our different agencies, cities, county, MnDOT, on the same page for what those recommended improvements are. We began some of our initial engagement this last summer, where we were saying, here's what we think are needs, what do you think? And I'll walk through some of those, but our next round is coming up in November and December here, where we're going to share more of the details on, okay, here's some improvement ideas, now what do you think with the public? So the rest of the presentation here is really going to focus then, like I mentioned, on Rolling Acres Road, Highway 5, and 82nd Street. And I'm going to just share with you where we're at on each of those three corridors, starting with Rolling Acres Road. So some of the things that we were hearing and our analysis showed with Rolling Acres Road, just a corridor-wide acknowledgement that we're hearing a lot from the neighborhood, had great attendance at neighborhood meetings. I think you've seen some of the engagement feedback. Speeding, aggressive driving, we have a lot of bicycle use across the corridor, along the corridor, difficulty walking to and from bus stops for children, some sight distance issues. Honestly, that engagement sort of rose this corridor to the level of, okay, maybe we need to talk a little bit more about, is there anything we can do in the shorter term rather than, the end of this study as well, which I want to talk about tonight. But that, there was a lot of participation from that group. And because of that, then the county has been meeting with both the owners of the local regional trail, which is Hennepin County Rail Authority, Three Rivers, and then also some other utility companies like Xcel Energy, to talk about lighting and what can we do? What can we do in this corridor, even to address some of these immediate needs. And this slide shows some of the things that either have been done or are being talked about so far. So the first one was a speed trailer, which was, just to capture the speeding. What's going on out here? Are people traveling at speeds higher than posted? And really that data did confirm that's happening.
Can you tell us how significantly? I believe it is. But is it, what is it, 40 out there? 45?
No. It's at least 45. 45? It's 45. And 85%, that's kind of the percentile of where we measure. And, 85% of the speeds were above that 45 miles an hour.
Oh,
so they are, yep, speeding is happening.
So we always suspected that, but this now actually confirms
Yep.
that. Okay.
Yep. So what we do with that, that will feed into our future steps here of what improvements get made to encourage people to drive the posted speed limit. We also heard a lot about the trail crossing, that, there's some issues with who's yielding to who. Is it the trail users that should be using to the cars? Is it the cars to the trail users? Not maybe seeing each other both ways. That we heard a lot about that trail crossing. So some immediate things that are being talked about are vegetation clearing within that trail right-of-way area to make sure the cars and the pedestrians and cyclists can see each other. That is being planned this fall. Now, it's October 28th, so, if everything comes together, that will be accomplished this fall. That's the plan. Also looking at some wood pole lighting to, again, help each other see each other a little bit better. Advanced signage was placed last month, where to just notify, trying to signal to motorists that there's something up ahead here to pay attention to.
Quick question on the clearing. Is that something you have to get a hold of the regional, the metropolitan regional trail owners, or is that something the county can do on its own?
They have been coordinating with Hennepin County Regional Rail. Yep, that's what's taken a little bit. We met with the neighborhood in July, and this is these type of things that are coming together, is the coordination.
You don't expect any issues that you believe at this point that will be able to be done this fall?
I think it's just the permitting question is, can we get that permit in time to get out there and get it cleared? I don't think there's an issue with the permit. It's really paperwork at this point.
Got it.
But
Okay.
can that get in this fall yet, or will it need to be right away next spring?
All right, super. You don't know when you're going to have a definitive answer?
I'm looking back this way. No, not at this point, but we can certainly, through Kara, keep you updated.
Gives you the permit.
Hennepin County Regional Rail Authority owns that right of way.
Okay.
So those are some immediate things, but also we know that there's more to be done with that trail crossing, which has led the county and the project team to be looking at, are there some other, we call them interim improvements. It's not a long-term fix, but is there anything else we can do to make this better? And one idea is showing here is a trail crossing realignment. So what it's doing, you can see sort of the S curves that's kind of built into the trail here. It's just to make a perpendicular crossing of the trail and the roadway. And what that does is it improves both users seeing each other, and it shortens that distance for people on bicycles and walking across there to actually physically cross the road. It's a shorter distance. This combined with the green is some of that vegetative clearing, and you can't see on here, but the wood pole lighting, and then perhaps an overhead flashing system to notify motorists that there's people trying to cross here, and pay attention. So this is one solution that is under consideration. I'm sure you're going to ask me about timing and what does that mean, and I'm going to circle back around to that. So some other thoughts were, okay, that was the trail itself. Is there anything on the corridor? Because we also heard a lot about the corridor itself, not just the trail crossing. And this is sort of a laundry list of ideas that the team had generated in terms of maybe we can restripe lane widths or add turn lanes or do something different with the striping of the roadway, rather than just the 2 lanes that are shown. Maybe add curbs or bump outs where we know people need to get across, or improve sight distances in some of those areas that are challenging too. One thing that we heard a lot from the neighborhood was, can you widen the shoulders? And I think this picture actually shows, the place that they're coming from, of the shoulders are very narrow, and is there ability to just add some extra pavement and, make that work? And that could be, but what we're finding as a short-term sort of fix, there's a lot of cost and actually complexity to doing that, because you have to make sure that the road base is appropriate, and you might have some right-of-way issues. And so at this point, we don't think that's really a short-term fix, but what this is leading us to is sort of our conclusions from some of this initial work is that we know we need to do something with this corridor. I mean, it has elevated the need to recognize that we need something. And any one of those interim improvements that we talked about is not a long-term fix. It's sort of it makes it better than today, but it's not the long-term fix. And so what we really need is we really need to get through our study here to say, what is the priorities? Should we invest in Rolling Acres Road first with a major reconstruction? Because then all of those things that were listed out on that screen are so much easier, and you can do it right and not just sort of, patch on things. If that comes to the need, then maybe you wait a little bit on the interim needs, because that could come first. We're not there yet with our study to say it should be Rolling Acres versus 82nd versus Highway 5. If, let's say, hypothetical, our study says, no, you should invest somewhere else first, and Rolling Acres maybe is second or third or fourth on the list, well, then that means let's look hard at those shorter-term interim improvements and what can we do now. So I don't have a definitive answer for any of you tonight, but I just want you to know that that's kind of the balancing act we are trying to figure out here, and will come next year, if that makes sense. So I'm going to move then to Highway 5. So again, we're talking about Highway 5 from Rolling Acres Road to Highway 41, just that eastern section here. And some of the things we found in this section are traffic volumes. You remember lots of red on that earlier map with congestion occurring and crash issues. We heard a lot from the neighborhoods, very same things, that it's difficult to get out of places like Minnewaska Parkway to try to take a left out. Rolling Acres Road intersection's pretty tough. The Arboretum traffic adds complexity when they have events and things going on. So we heard a lot of what our analysis was telling us. And we are now looking at what to do with Highway 5. So what our work has shown is that we really need 4 lanes on Highway 5 in this section. Now, we haven't got to downtown yet, so that will be sort of our next phase, and we'll come back to you and do a similar update on our findings. But what we're seeing right now in this eastern segment is that we do need 4 lanes on Highway 5 from Rolling Acres to Highway 41. We have multiple intersection options. So for Rolling Acres Road, we're looking at, should that continue to be a signal? And if so, do we need more lanes, or should it be something else? The Arboretum has a master plan, and we are assuming, based on that master plan, that their main axis is going to shift to the west of where it is today, to be that 4th leg on the Minnewaska Parkway intersection. So that now, with their driveway shifting, and all of the traffic that feeds into Minnewaska Parkway, there can be something more there. We're looking at signals, roundabout, looking at many different intersection types there. And then we're also looking at what to do with 41 and 5. I think one of the things I wanted to spend a little bit of time on tonight was talking about the sequence with 82nd Street. Again, we don't have an implementation plan and priorities all in place, but we know enough about the traffic volumes that I wanted to share, some of those findings with you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we heard from the neighborhoods, and then I'll come back to the numbers. With 82nd Street, I don't think it's any surprise here that we heard a lot about, that's being used pretty heavily, and as a gravel road, it's just not functioning for the traffic that wants to be on there. It's been planned, as you know, for many years. And we heard that, some of the intersections, like with Bavaria Road and the McKnight intersection, which is sort of midway through that corridor, is a problem. That there's crash issues, people driving too fast for a gravel road, and, sliding into ditches. There's some topography on that roadway as well. But more importantly for tonight is the numbers. So I know these are a lot of numbers, but I want to kind of help you understand what our analysis is showing so far. So I'll walk you through Highway 5, just so you understand the various scenarios that are shown in different colors there. So for today on Highway 5, there are 26,000 vehicles every day. every day on that section of Highway 5. Our no-build situation is where, again, we forecast if this area grows and we don't make any roadway improvements, you know, how many vehicles are going to be on that roadway. And we have about 32,000 vehicles a day. Now, the purple number, 2040 with 82nd Street, is saying, okay, what if 82nd Street was built to a two-lane, which is what the county's model has been planning for. If that was built,
Just for clarity, two lanes each way or?
two-lane, just a two-lane roadway.
One each way?
Yep,
All right, just
two-lane
wanted to
roadway.
make sure.
Yep. So if 82nd Street were there, you could see that number on Highway 5 goes down to 28,000. So some people may choose to use 82nd Street, but it is not functioning as another Highway 5. It is a piece to the network. The green number is saying, okay, now what if we just improve Highway 5 to 4 lanes? We didn't do 82nd Street, just Highway 5 to 4 lane. And you can see that number goes way back up to 35,000 because it's working, it's great, they're on that facility. And then the last one is just 82nd Street and Highway 5 are both built, so 30,000. I know it's a lot of numbers, but I just want to, and it really doesn't vary that much on Highway 5. But where I want to kind of point out some of these details is I know we've heard some concern from the CASA 18, you know, so west of Bavaria. We've heard about concern that if we add 82nd Street, you know, that's going to increase traffic on 18 and will we need more there? And, you know, what we're seeing from this analysis is that if 82nd Street were built before Highway 5, so that connection is there would be a little bit more vehicles. So about 1,200 more vehicles would be attracted to the west side of 18. But once we get Highway 5 to 4 lane, that reverses. So we're only talking a difference of about 1,500 vehicles that would be attracted in that interim scenario of what comes first. I just want to pause there for questions because this is a lot of numbers I'm throwing at you. Does that make sense? So today on 18, there's 4,000 vehicles a day. When we're done, and even in the no build, there's 5,500. When Highway 5 is improved to a 4 lane and 82nd Street is in place, that number's 5,500. All of the numbers, whether it's 4,000, 5,500, 6,700, that roadway is built for those volumes and we're not focusing on improvements there.
Do the projections for 18, are they pretty comprehensive and they include the impact of 43, Victoria Drive, all the things that are happening there and all the growth
Yes.
And even with all that growth, 18 doesn't move.
No.
It's kind of spooky. I mean,
There's some growth. I mean, you're seeing a growth of 4,000 to anywhere 5,500 to 6,000 trips a day. So there is some growth. And we're using Carver County's traffic model. So it's a network model. It is factoring in how trips are generating in the entire area here.
It is surprising, especially if we're looking at Teller's Road a little bit south on 43, if you're familiar with that area. All of that growth from Waconia has either got to go north to 18 or south to County Road 10. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing no impact from that, essentially.
Right. Well, and that's probably that growth, 1,500 to 2,000 vehicles on a road that's carrying 4,000 today. I can't do my math, but that percentage, I mean, there's growth there. It's not doubling, it's not tripling, but there is growth there.
And then the only scenario that actually increases the traffic would be to improve 82nd Street and not do an
Right.
improvement on 5.
Right.
Which
isn't
is
really,
surprising.
yeah. And so just to reiterate that scenario, it was never intended that was the end goal scenario. It was just sort of, I know those questions are out there of what goes first and what's the impact of what goes first, even though we don't know that yet. So that's why we've been kind of playing with the hypotheticals. If this first for a little while, then what?
So with a 2-lane road, if basically paving the dirt road for 82nd now, a sevenfold increase in traffic is what you would expect on that?
Yep, we're projecting 8,500 vehicles on that roadway in 2040, again, 20 years out from now. And that number doesn't really vary, you know, when you look at, okay, when you build it, there's 8,500 there. But when Highway 5 is also in place, there's 8,200. So again, it's not saying everyone from Highway 5 is going to be using 82nd Street. It's just a piece to the network, and these numbers kind of show that.
And Angie, just to clarify that, on the existing, on the gravel, that's more like 500, that's not 12, that 1,200 is on the paved section, on the
Oh,
very
sure.
west end.
Oh,
So the
okay.
number's more like 500 today.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
significant increase if 82nd were to be paved, basically.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
And that, can you tell if most of that comes off of Highway 5? Is that traffic shifting south?
There's some of that. There's some of that using,
4,000 of it, looks like.
yep. There's also a significant connection from, you know, Chanhassen, Chaska area, you know, to this. We heard a lot from people of who's even using it today, of people going to and from the schools on that roadway.
So when you assume that, I think what we all agree that if we put Highway 5, get that up to snuff first, that would solve a ton of problems. Now, we also know that Highway 5 is a state highway and it's not a county highway, so we don't know, we don't have any control over that as much.
Right.
Talk a little bit about what kind of, what gets put into place if we say, you know what, a lot of our problems are going to be solved by Highway 5. You have to put some pressure on MnDOT to put that on their list, to make sure that we're in their queue. And I'm understanding at this point in time, we don't even show up on their radar.
Well, they are participating in this study, both financially and as part of our technical and, you know, team that makes decisions. So they will have they'll be just as involved as our communities are in the implementation plan that gets supported at the end of this. You're right. Highway 5 investments are much higher in investment than in 82nd Street, and different dollars. But there are, Lyndon was mentioning grants. There are federal monies every 2 years where a project like this could be eligible for. So I think those are some of the decision points that are going to have to fold into this implementation plan. Do you choose to do that first, and then the risk is that you wait, you know, on that, or do you choose to do something else and work on that at the same time? You know, that those are the things we have to sort out, but MnDOT is at the table.
So
So you can't shut down Highway 5, so would 82nd have to be done first?
Yeah,
So you'd have to have a good idea Highway 5 was coming.
it's a good question, and one we can't quite answer yet. And I was saying yes, because it comes up every single time of how do we stage this from a construction standpoint? And if 82nd is there, would that help, you know, from a construction? Those are things we also need to consider, but I don't know yet.
We still need to run the traffic if Highway 5's closed. Where is traffic going to go?
Right.
Right.
We don't really know yet, but that's part of the analysis.
Yeah.
Going back to the mayor's point, I think, if you look, and Angie, if you look at the money, remember the county did implement the half-cent sales tax, and all these, one of the main reasons we're doing this study is all these projects except for 41 are on that plan. So the county is coming to the table with county sales tax money to help these improvements. So although Highway 5 is not considered an up-here project for MnDOT, because it's not a principal arterial, and that's what they will focus on, they'll have some money, but they won't have enough. So how do we bridge that gap? Is there enough county money, city money, grant money to make it work? Or do we have to push it off further? That's really what we need to get into the financial plan for. Do we need to build 82nd because it's more under our control, a little less involved with the massive amount of money we need? Well, clearly that would be a Band-Aid, because if you built that first on its own, the traffic on Highway 5 would get to 28.2, which is only 2,000 more than it is today. So it would give you a little time on Highway 5 to gather all the funds to do the big one. But we don't want to say that yet. That's the things we're thinking about, that we'll have recommendations for the council to look at. This is what we think is the best way to go.
So how does Highway 7 fit into this? Because Highway 7, I use that, and that's it's amazing the things you've done to it that have calibrated it and improved it. So that's an example of how you can take a 2-lane road that's overloaded and make it work. But I would think 7 is part of the solution for Highway 5, which then puts more pressure on Rolling Acres Road, because now you've got to divert all this traffic.
Right.
Yeah, very complex.
So
Yes, yes.
I'd like to get your thoughts. I went to a meeting of a lot of the mayors of Carver County when we met down at the Chaska Town Hall. I can't remember, were you there at that? Yeah. And the MnDOT commissioner said in that meeting that Highway 5, they have a 25-year planning horizon, and Highway 5 isn't even in their plan. So what's the realistic opportunity of getting MnDOT? I know you say they're participating in this, but if they have a 25-year planning horizon, I mean, can we get them to get this in there, get this expedited, get it moved up?
Yeah, it's
Because
kinda-
the impression I had is
Right.
they weren't even considering this.
Yeah, so it'll be, maybe a political solution like we're working with 212. Just to step back a little bit, all these numbers here in the future.
Wait a
assume-
second, can you come up? I don't think they can hear you. Sorry.
All these numbers here, it's a lot of data here. All these traffic numbers assume 212 is 4-lane, all the way to Norwood, Young America. So it's taking a lot of traffic. You talked about the growth. Between Highway 10 and 212, a lot of that traffic's going to there. So this assumes that will happen, right? Unless you
relieves
look at
some
the
of the
no
pressure.
build, which is the red, means nothing's happening anywhere. Anyway, so MnDOT, back to MnDOT, I would say they do have certain little pots of money, like the intersection at Rolling Acres and 5 has been identified as a safety problem. So they've got small pots of money. So you could scrounge up a few million towards the project. They can also put in engineering time at no cost. Various things, just like with 212 we're doing now. You come up with these little pots, and eventually you got enough. And then the county and the city has to decide how much are we willing to put in. And is that enough to get us over the edge, or do we wait? That's really what it's going to come down to with 5. And the numbers, we don't even know what the costs are yet. We're speculating 25 million plus, but the study will give us that number. Maybe a year from now, we'll know much more detail on the costs. So it's really hard to throw those scenarios in the air when you don't have the cost of all the improvements, and there could be 15, 20 different projects we want to do in this area over the next 20 years.
So hypothetically, just for a moment here, you assemble all the pots of money, grants, whatever is available, and you get to whatever that magical number is. If it's not in the state's planning history or in their planning cycle, would they still say, well, if you've got the money and you want to do it, go ahead and
Yeah.
fix our road?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so they wouldn't stop it because it's not coming from them?
No, they're not going to stop it.
All right.
I would say if we said, well, we'll just pay for it, they'd go, fine.
Well, clearly I was a little concerned, if you will, when I heard that they said it's not in their planning cycle. And my
Right.
response was, what do we go and tell the 10,000 people in Victoria and all the communities west of us? I mean, there's serious issues on Highway 5, and we haven't done anything for more than a decade, so.
Well, what we found is, especially in the suburban communities, we're all pretty skilled, you guys, us. We go after every avenue until we find something. State legislature, we've applied for bonding funds for 212. We just had the Senate come out on a tour for that. So if this becomes a significant problem to the communities, there's a lot of communities here. We can have a voice as one, 212 we hope is solved by then, and then we can go after this. So I think it's just a matter of when the time, it's not a matter of if, it's when at this point, I think.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
All right, I think I just have one slide here left. So schedule and where we're moving forward next. We have a number of upcoming engagement opportunities with our stakeholder advisory committee that you guys helped. If you remember, we had volunteers for that committee. That committee's meeting again November 6th, and then we have a couple neighborhood meetings coming up, both with Rolling Acres Road, and we kind of lumped Highway 5 and 82nd Street neighbors into one meeting, and then an open house on December 17th. The thought there is to share our progress on this eastern part of Highway 5, 82nd Street, kind of dive into a little bit more of the details on the intersection options and, see what feedback we get from those groups.
I'm sorry, are those meetings going to be here in the Victoria City Hall, or are they going to be at county, or?
So I believe all 4 of these meetings are at the Arboretum. We tried to stay a little bit towards the eastern end of the corridor with that meeting. Last time we had our Rolling Acres meeting, we had it right at the church. We couldn't find a date that worked in our time frame here to be at the church, so we are meeting at the Arboretum with those folks. And then we will sort of repeat all of this again in the future when we start looking at the western part of Highway 5 and long-term improvements on Rolling Acres Road.
Angie, I just note that at those upcoming meetings, there'll be actual concepts available. You know, what is it, improved intersection of Rolling Acres Road and 5 look like? What are the different options that have been seen? So certainly would encourage you all to consider attending some subset of these, and we'll be using social media, of course, to make sure that the public knows about the public open house in particular. You'll send postcards to all sorts of people for all of these too.
Correct. Yep.
One other question for you. We've got, what, roughly 18 months left to go in this, 15 months to go? I was hoping, and I just want to know if this is realistic or not, whether, given that this council's already voted to keep Marsh Lake Road a city road and pave it, there were some discussions about those resources being maybe potentially diverted over to help with this, maybe do some work on 82nd Street. So one of the things that's come up and been discussed, and I'd like to get your thoughts on whether or not this is realistic, but somehow expedite, Victoria only has about a quarter mile of 82nd Street there at Bavaria, and that's one of the intersections I've been trying to get improvements because there's safety issues and traffic issues there. Is there any chance, instead of waiting 18 months, and I understand why you have to do that for the area-wide, but is there any chance in trying to do something on that little piece, whether it's a roundabout or something that you know is going to be part of the final design, or is that just really wishful thinking?
You know, at this point, I don't think we're looking at advancing anything beyond the potentially the interim improvements on Rolling Acres Road, and just sort of sorting out how does this all work together? Because even a roundabout has a significant cost to it, and so and there's another community. You know, we have Chaska with 82nd Street that needs to weigh in and buy in, and we, you know, our goal here is that all communities are on the same page with this. So I don't have that answer for you tonight.
So nice to think we could do that, but the reality is it's not going to happen.
At this point, we're not planning for that.
Yeah,
Okay.
if I could ask, follow up with Angie, follow up to the money. They're both, Marsh Lake Road was and 82nd is, they're both future CASA routes, County State Aid Highway. So they're eligible for that gas tax money. But it's a reimbursable account, so you have to do a project before you get the money. So we can't, the money we plan for Marsh Lake Road can be used on any county state aid highway in the county because it's a reimbursable account.
But there's no earmark for, this
Right.
was going to happen in Victoria, so we can move this money over
Right.
to a different, there's no earmark like that.
It was wishful thinking, but I mean, we tried.
So you don't like quoting numbers, I understand that. But what is the order of magnitude of doing Highway 5 between 41 and Bavaria? And what is the order of magnitude of doing 82nd Street between Bavaria and,
41.
well,
Is it
I
a
would say
times
2 to 1.
2? Yeah, I was gonna say times 2, maybe
Yeah.
2.5.
1 is the ratio, so what is the base number?
30 to 15?
30 to 50 on Highway 5 for that
30
section.
million for 5, 15 for 82nd. Did you say 82nd or Rolling Acres?
86.
Yeah, that's just ballpark.
So, yeah, so these are big obstacles.
One's a 2-lane road, one's a 4-lane road, so just assuming it's about double.
Double, yeah.
But Highway 5's got, you know, that part through
Through the
Fire
lake.
Lake.
Yeah.
That'll likely be some sort of land bridge, or that's gonna be an expensive project.
So some of the concepts that Kara mentioned that will roll out at these meetings will have some of those details and options, not all the dollars yet, but some of the details like
Just
Lyndon was
broad
mentioning.
dollars. I don't want
Yeah.
specific. Rolling Acres Road, what is the order of magnitude for that?
Well, I think it really depends if it's a complete reconstruction, you know.
It would seem it would be with roundabouts or traffic lights.
How
you know.
long is that, do you remember, Karen? Length?
It's not very long,
It's about
because
a mile.
Mile, I want to say.
one of the reasons
Yeah.
it's used is because it's the shortest distance
Yeah.
through there
Yep.
on both sides.
Yep.
Well, see, the roundabouts at each end, assuming one's a roundabout or a traffic light, those are 2 million apiece, minimum, just to build them. So 15 is a roundabout. It's about a reasonable cost.
Your Apple Watch?
15 is a dart, yep.
Darts are good. Just gives you an idea.
There you go,
of the-
60 million on
Yeah.
three corridors.
Yeah, so this is,
You just don't have that laying around?
Check the
Not
couch,
yet.
Lot of money,
check the couch.
yeah.
Given the timeline, going back to Rolling Acres Road for a moment, given the timeline that this is at least 18 more months for the study, in these things, I'm guessing based on what I saw with Rolling Acres Road will take longer. It seems pretty evident that we're going to have to do something with Rolling Acres Road because it is pretty dangerous there if you ride that trail. So is it safe to assume, based on what we know sitting here tonight, that it's almost inevitable that we're going to have to do some interim improvements, given that we're looking at $60 million for the three roads together?
Yeah, the trail crossing at a minimum. The
Okay.
rest of it, we're not sure yet.
All right.
Definitely that trail cross, we're gonna recommend something there, for sure.
Okay, so that is going to go forward with
Probably
something?
next year, yep.
Okay.
so the trail crossing, I see the visibility part of it. Are the rules gonna change? Because you have bicyclists, walkers, runners, anything. And if you follow the letter of the law, if you're on a bicycle, there's stop signs there. If you're on a bicycle, you have to stop. And it's the pedestrians that could walk across and be hit. So is that gonna be clarified as to how, are the rules gonna change to make that easier for people to get through there?
Well, I would say that if we implement the rapid flashing beacon, you gotta hit the button before you cross.
Yeah.
Bicycle, pedestrian, doesn't matter.
Have you thought of lowering that speed limit there, since it is only a mile long and it's 45?
We have no control of the
No
speed.
control, is that MnDOT?
Yep.
Okay.
Rolling
Well, you
Acres.
guys can control speed now, but not on county roads.
Yeah,
I was going to say, Rolling Acres.
We're working
isn't
on that
county.
one.
Is it
Rolling
county?
Acres County,
Yeah.
isn't it?
County road, yep, yep.
So you control that on the county road, the speed limit?
Not
Well,
by
we-
statute.
We do a study, and then MnDOT determines what the appropriate speed is.
We gotta.
Got it. All right, council, any other questions?
Nope.
Anything to add?
No, just that the upcoming meetings, and then I would anticipate we'd be back in front of you sometime in early 2020 to give you the next update on our other segments.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very,
Yeah.
very helpful.
Great.
All right. At this point, we've got 10 minutes. Let's take can I get a quick motion to adjourn the workshop and we'll reconvene?
Motion to adjourn.
Second, please.
Second.
Discussion, hearing none. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. We're adjourned.